She threw the engagement ring in his chest and walked out of the Buckhead, knowing she'd never see him again. But 12 hours earlier, she thought she found her forever. 6 months earlier, the Magnolia Diner's neon sign buzzed against Atlanta's summer heat, casting pink shadows across cracked vinyl booths where working folks came to stretch paychecks over coffee and hope. Aaliyah wiped sweat from her forehead as she balanced 3 plates on one arm, her feet screaming in shoes held together with prayer and superglue. Have you ever trusted someone so that their betrayal felt like losing a piece of your soul? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. Table 12 needs more coffee, called Marcus from behind the grill, his voice cutting through the dinner rush chaos. Table 12, the man in the $1,000 suit who'd been nursing the same cup for an hour while his date, a blonde with more diamonds than personality, complained about everything from the lighting to the menu to the atmosphere. Aaliyah had watched him check his phone 17 times, his jaw getting tighter with each glance. She approached with a coffee pot, catching fragments of their conversation. "Daddy thinks we'd make a perfect match," the woman was saying, examining her manicure. "I mean, your net worth plus my connections? We could own Atlanta society." The man, she'd heard the hostess call him Mr. Winters, looked like he wanted to disappear into the worn carpet. When Aaliyah reached for his cup, their fingers touched for just a second. Electric. That's the only word for it. His eyes met hers, and she saw something she recognized. The look of someone trapped in a life that didn't fit. "More coffee?" she asked, her voice steadier than her pulse. "Please." His smile was tired but genuine. "This is the best coffee I've had all week." His date snorted. "Please. I'm sure you've had better at the country club." "Actually," he said, still looking at Aaliyah, "I don't think I have." Heat crawled up Aaliyah's neck. She'd served hundreds of wealthy customers who looked through her like she was invisible, but this man saw her. Really saw her. The way he held her gaze made her stomach flip in ways that had nothing to do with the diner's greasy food. "Anything else I can get you?" she asked, professional mask sliding back into place. "Just a check, thanks." His voice dropped lower. "And maybe your opinion on something?" His date was already pulling out her phone, clearly bored with the conversation. Aaliyah leaned slightly closer, catching a hint of his cologne, expensive but not overwhelming. "What kind of opinion?" "If someone offered to invest in your dreams," he said quietly, "but you'd never met them before tonight, would you trust them?" The question hit her like a slap. This stranger, this rich man in his perfect suit, was asking about dreams and trust while his gold digger date planned their future fortune. Aaliyah straightened, every defensive instinct firing. "Depends," she said carefully. "Are they offering because they believe in the dream, or because they want something in return?" His smile was sad. "That's exactly what I was afraid you'd say." 20 minutes later, after his date stormed out complaining about wasting an evening, he sat alone at table 12. Aaliyah refilled his cup without being asked. "Rough night?" she asked. "The roughest." He pulled out his wallet, leaving a $50 tip on a $12 check. "But maybe it just got better." As he stood to leave, he slipped his business card under the coffee cup. Aaliyah's hands shook as she read the handwritten note on the back. "Dinner tomorrow? Somewhere that serves better coffee. And Nolan Winters, CEO, Winters Tech Solutions." She'd heard that name before. Local boy made good, built a company from nothing, worth more money than she'd see in 3 lifetimes. And he was asking her, a waitress from the South Side, on a date. Standing in the diner's harsh fluorescent light, holding his card, Aaliyah felt something dangerous bloom in her chest. Hope, the kind that gets working girls like her into trouble with men like him. She had no idea that in 6 months, she'd be throwing his ring back at him and walking away from everything she'd ever wanted. All she knew was that for the first time in years, someone had looked at her like she mattered. What would you do if a millionaire asked you out after one conversation? Would you trust your instincts or listen to everyone who'd tell you it's too good to be true? Let me know in the comments, because Aaliyah's about to make a choice that changes everything. She'd sworn off rich men after watching them destroy her neighborhood, until one offered to close his restaurant just so she could have a real conversation. Aaliyah stared at the business card for 3 days. It lived on her nightstand, next to unpaid bills and a photo of her grandmother's restaurant, the one that got bulldozed for luxury condos when she was 15. Every time she looked at Nolan's number, she heard her grandmother's voice. Baby girl, men with money don't date girls like us. They play with us. But Thursday night, after another double shift and a customer who left religious pamphlets instead of tips, she dialed. Winters. His voice was crisp, professional. This is Aaliyah, from the diner. Silence. Then softer. I was hoping you'd call. About that dinner. She twisted the phone cord around her finger. I don't do fancy places where I need a dictionary to read the menu. His laugh was warm. What if I told you I reserved somewhere special? Somewhere we could actually talk. That's how she ended up standing outside Chez Laurent at 8 p.m., wearing her one good dress and feeling completely out of place. The restaurant was dark, not a single customer visible through the windows. A security guard unlocked the door as she approached. Miss Foster? Mr. Winters is waiting. Inside, candles flickered on empty tables, Atlanta's skyline twinkling through floor-to-ceiling windows. Soft jazz played from hidden speakers, but the massive dining room felt intimate, like a secret. Nolan stood when she entered, and her breath caught. Out of his business suit, wearing dark jeans and a button-down with sleeves rolled up, he looked younger. Approachable. Dangerous. You rented out an entire restaurant? She asked, stopping a few feet away. I wanted to talk without interruption. He pulled out her chair. Plus, I figured you'd get enough of restaurants full of people. She sat, hyper-aware of his hand briefly touching her shoulder. This must have cost a fortune. Worth every penny to see you relax. He settled across from her, candlelight catching the gold flecks in his brown eyes. You looked ready to run when you walked in. I was. Aaliyah smoothed her dress, suddenly self-conscious. This isn't my world, Nolan. I work in diners and live in apartments where the heat doesn't always work. Mine either, until 5 years ago. He poured wine from a bottle she couldn't pronounce. I grew up in Cleveland, sharing a bedroom with 2 brothers. My dad worked construction, my mom cleaned offices at night. I wore the same 3 shirts to high school because we couldn't afford more. She studied his face, searching for lies. Then how? Scholarships. Student loans I'm still paying off. 80-hour weeks building code in my buddy's garage. He leaned forward. Success doesn't erase where you come from, Aaliyah. It just changes your address. The waiter appeared with plates she didn't order. Perfectly prepared food that probably cost more than her weekly groceries. But Nolan barely touched his meal, too busy asking about her dreams, her plans, her grandmother's recipes she still remembered. Tell me about the restaurant, he said, refilling her wine glass. What restaurant? The one you're going to open. I saw it in your eyes the other night when you talked about trust and dreams. Heat bloomed in her chest. No one had ever asked about her plans, not seriously. It's stupid. Try me. So she told him. About weekend catering gigs that barely covered her car payment. About the business plan she'd written on napkins during slow shifts. About wanting to serve her grandmother's soul food recipes to people who'd appreciate the love baked into every dish. It's called Nana's Table, she finished, embarrassed by how much she'd revealed. Comfort food that actually comforts. Nolan was quiet for a long moment, studying her with an intensity that made her squirm. How much do you need? For what? To start. Equipment, location, first year operating costs. I what? Her fork clattered against her plate. You can't be serious. Dead serious. He pulled out his phone. I invest in businesses I believe in. And I believe in you. You don't even know me. I know enough. His eyes held hers. I know you work harder than anyone should have to. I know you're brilliant. Your ideas about neighborhood dining and community connection, that's the future of restaurants. And I know you're brave enough to dream big in a city that tells people like us to stay small. People like us. The phrase hung between them, bridging worlds that seemed impossible to cross. Aaliyah felt something crack open in her chest, something that had been locked down since her grandmother died. Why? She whispered. Because 3 days ago, I was on a date with someone who saw dollar signs when she looked at me. You see a person. He reached across the table, his fingers covering hers. That's rarer than you think. His touch sent fire up her arm. She should pull away, should remember all the warnings about men with money and hidden motives. Instead, she turned her palm up, letting their fingers interlock. I scare easy, she admitted. I noticed. His thumb traced across her knuckles. But you're here anyway. The elevator ride down felt charged with possibility. She was hyper-aware of him beside her, the way he smelled like cedar and ambition, the way he kept sneaking glances when he thought she wasn't looking. As his driver pulled up to her apartment complex, Nolan turned to face her. Would you let me invest in your restaurant dream? The question she'd been dreading and hoping for all evening. Aaliyah looked out at her building. Paint peeling, half the porch lights broken, dreams deferred behind every window. I want to earn it, she said finally, not just accept it. His smile could have powered the whole complex. I was hoping you'd say that. Have you ever had someone believe in you before you believed in yourself? Someone who saw your potential when everyone else saw your circumstances? Drop a heart if you know that feeling, because what happens next will test whether belief is enough to bridge two different worlds. She'd been propositioned by men before, but never for a business partnership that could change her entire life, if she was brave enough to trust him. 2 weeks later, Aaliyah found herself in the passenger seat of Nolan's BMW, driving through neighborhoods she'd only seen from bus windows. Her work uniform had been replaced by clothes he'd insisted on buying. Not charity, he'd said, but professional attire for potential business partners. Where exactly are we going? She asked, watching gentrification creep through streets where she used to play as a child. You'll see. His hand rested on the gear shift, close enough to touch. Close enough to make her pulse quicken every time he changed lanes. They stopped in front of a vacant building in the old Fourth Ward, windows papered over, for lease signs weathered by Atlanta's brutal summers. But the bones were good, brick facade, high ceilings visible through gaps in the paper, foot traffic from the nearby park. What do you think? Nolan asked, pulling out a set of keys. I think you're crazy if you want to invest in this neighborhood. But she was already imagining it. Tables by those big windows, the smell of her grandmother's cornbread drawing people in from the sidewalk. Inside, dust motes danced in afternoon, light streaming through cracks. The space was bigger than it looked from the street, with original hardwood floors and exposed brick walls that spoke of history and possibility. Rent's reasonable because it needs work, Nolan said, watching her face. But the location is perfect. Young professionals moving in, families putting down roots. People hungry for authentic food and community connection. Aaliyah walked to the center of the empty room, closed her eyes, and listened. She could almost hear it. Conversations over comfort food, laughter echoing off brick walls, the satisfying clink of satisfied customers. How much? She asked, not opening her eyes. For the space? $800 a month. For everything. Start to finish. $150,000. Maybe $200 if you want top-of-the-line equipment. The number hit her like cold water. More money than she'd see in 5 years of waiting tables. She opened her eyes to find him watching her with an expression she couldn't read. And you just give me that money? Loan it. With reasonable terms and a partnership agreement. He moved closer, his voice dropping. I provide the capital. You provide the vision and sweat equity. We split ownership 60-40. 60 for you. 60 for you. His smile was soft. It's your dream, Aaliyah. I'm just helping make it real. She wanted to say yes so badly it physically hurt. But years of disappointment had taught her caution. What's the catch? No catch. Just. He ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking younger. Just don't disappear on me when things get complicated. Because they will get complicated. What kind of complicated? The kind where my mother calls your restaurant Nolan's little charity project. The kind where people assume you're sleeping with me for money. His eyes held hers. The kind where you start wondering if they're right. Heat crawled up her neck. The attraction between them had been growing stronger with each conversation, each accidental touch. She'd catch him looking at her lips when she talked, and she'd find excuses to brush against him when they walked side by side. Are we? She asked quietly. Sleeping together, I mean. Is that part of your investment strategy? God, no. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see flecks of green in his brown eyes. If we go down that road, it'll be because we both want it, not because of any business deal. And if we do want to, the question hung between them like a challenge. Nolan's gaze dropped to her mouth, then back to her eyes. Then we'll figure it out like adults. But first, I want to know, are you going to let me help you build this dream or not? Aaliyah looked around the empty space one more time. At the windows that would frame her customers' faces, at the walls that would hold her grandmother's photos, at the kitchen where she'd pour love into every dish. I have conditions, she said finally. Name them. I design the menu. I hire the staff. I make all the food decisions. Done. No special treatment, because we're whatever we are. Wouldn't dream of it. And if this thing between us goes bad, the business stays separate. Nolan was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled a folded contract from his jacket pocket, already written in. She took the papers, scanning terms that seemed too good to be true. You had this prepared before you asked me. I hoped you'd say yes. He moved to the windows, looking out at the street. But I also know you're smart enough to protect yourself. That's one of the things he caught himself. One of the things you what? He turned back to her, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. One of the things I'm falling for. The admission hung between them like a live wire. Aaliyah felt her carefully constructed walls starting to crumble. This man, this impossible man, was offering her everything she dreamed of and asking for nothing but partnership in return. Nolan, sign the papers first, he said quietly. Then we could talk about the other thing. Her hand shook as she wrote her name on the dotted line. The second the pen left the paper, he was moving toward her and she was meeting him halfway. Their lips met in the middle of her future restaurant, surrounded by dust and dreams and possibility. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, like they were both afraid of breaking something precious. Then her hands tangled in his hair, and he pulled her closer, and careful went out the window. She could taste ambition on his tongue, feel promise in the way his hands framed her face. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she realized everything had changed. She was no longer Aaliyah Foster, waitress. She was Aaliyah Foster, restaurateur, partner, woman kissing a millionaire in her very own building. So, she whispered against his lips, when do we start? His answer was another kiss that tasted like forever and felt like coming home. What would you do if someone offered to make all your dreams come true, but you weren't sure if you could trust their motives? Would you take the leap or play it safe? Let me know in the comments, because Aaliyah's about to learn that mixing business with pleasure is more dangerous than she ever imagined. He walked into her world like he belonged there, not as a savior, but as a man who recognized her strength before she did. The construction noise started at 7 a.m. sharp, 3 weeks after the papers were signed. Aaliyah stood in the doorway of what would soon be Nana's table, watching contractors tear down walls and dreams take shape in real time. Nolan appeared beside her, with 2 cups of coffee and dark circles under his eyes. You look like hell, she said, accepting the cup gratefully.
Board meeting ran until midnight. Investors getting nervous about some new projects. He rubbed his face. But I wanted to be here when the kitchen equipment arrived. That was the thing about Nolan that kept surprising her. He could have written the check and walked away, but instead he showed up every morning, rolling up his sleeves, asking questions about menu placement and table arrangements like her opinion actually mattered. Your phone's been buzzing all morning, she said, nodding toward his jacket pocket. My mother. Again. His jaw tightened. She heard about the restaurant, and she wants to have lunch. The 3 of us. Aaliyah nearly choked on her coffee. She wants to meet me. She wants to assess the situation. Nolan's voice was flat. Figure out how much damage I'm doing to the family reputation by playing house with the help. The words hit like a slap. Aaliyah had known this was coming. The moment when his world would crash into hers and she'd be found lacking. But hearing it out loud still stung. Maybe she's right, she said quietly. Maybe I'm out of my league. Nolan's response was immediate and fierce. Don't let her poison this before it even starts. He set down his coffee and turned to face her fully. You want to know what I see when I look at you? I see a woman who works 3 jobs and still finds time to dream. who can run numbers in her head faster than my accountants, who remembers every regular customer's order and their kids' names and their birthday specials. His hands cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. I see strength, Aaliyah. The kind money can't buy. The kiss that followed was desperate, hungry, full of everything they'd been dancing around for weeks. Her back hit the construction debris, and she didn't care. His mouth was demanding, his hands threading through her hair, and she responded with equal intensity. This wasn't gentle or careful. This was need and frustration and the fear that outside forces might tear them apart before they figured out what they were building together. Mr. Winters? They broke apart to find the head contractor standing in the doorway, clearly uncomfortable. Sorry to interrupt, but we need your approval on the electrical layout. Nolan's hands dropped from her face, but he didn't step away. Give us 5 minutes. When they were alone again, Aaliyah smoothed her hair, trying to regain composure. This is exactly what your mother's worried about, isn't it? You making out with your business partner in a construction zone. I don't give a damn what my mother worries about. But his voice lacked conviction. This thing between us, it's separate from the business. Is it though? She moved away from the wall, creating distance between them. Because from where I'm standing, it looks pretty tangled up. Aaliyah. No, I get it. Rich boy rebelling against mommy by dating the poor black girl. Tale as old as time. The words came out harsher than she meant, but weeks of buried insecurity finally had an outlet. Nolan's face went tight. You think this is about rebellion? Isn't it? If it was about rebellion, I'd have picked someone easier. Someone who wouldn't challenge every assumption I make or call me out when I'm being an ass. He stepped closer again, his voice dropping. Someone who wouldn't make me want things I've never wanted before. Like what? Like coming home to the same person every night. Like building something that lasts longer than a quarterly profit report. His thumb traced her cheekbone. Like maybe not eating dinner alone for the rest of my life. The admission was quiet, vulnerable, and it hit her harder than his passion had moments before. This wasn't about proving a point or shocking his family. This was about loneliness, recognizing loneliness, and choosing to fight it together. Your mother still want to hate me, she said softly. Probably. Does that scare you? Terrifies me. She leaned into his touch, but not enough to walk away. Good. His smile was relieved. Because I already made reservations for Saturday. Where? The Ritz-Carlton. Tea service. Very civilized, very public, very hard for her to make scene. Aaliyah laughed despite herself. You're bringing me to meet your mother at high tea? Figure we might as well go all in. He kissed her forehead. Besides, if she's going to judge you, let's give her something worth judging. That Saturday, Aaliyah stood in front of her closet for an hour, rejecting everything she owned. Finally, she called her best friend Maya for backup. Girl, what are you trying to prove? Maya asked, pulling dresses Aaliyah had forgotten she owned. That I deserve to be there. You do deserve to be there. The question is whether she deserves to meet you. Maya held up a navy blue dress with clean lines and just enough attitude to make a statement. This one, classy but not trying too hard. At the Ritz-Carlton, Nolan was waiting in the lobby, looking devastatingly handsome in a charcoal suit. But it was the expression on his face when he saw her, pride mixed with something deeper, that made her feel beautiful. Ready? He asked, offering his arm. As I'll ever be. Helen Winters was exactly what Aaliyah expected. Perfectly coiffed silver hair, designer everything, the kind of posture that came from generations of assumed superiority. She was also smaller than expected, which somehow made her more intimidating rather than less. Mother, I'd like you to meet Aaliyah Foster, Nolan said, his hand warm on the small of Aaliyah's back. Miss Foster. Helen's handshake was brief, clinical. Nolan tells me you're opening a restaurant. We are, yes. Aaliyah kept her voice steady. Soul food with a modern approach. Community-focused dining. How interesting. Helen's tone suggested it was anything but. And what's your background in restaurant management? The interrogation lasted through 3 courses of finger sandwiches and passive-aggressive commentary, disguised as polite conversation. Helen questioned everything. Aaliyah's education, her family background, her long-term intentions regarding her son. I just want to understand, Helen said finally, setting down her teacup with deliberate precision. What exactly you bring to this partnership? The question was loaded, implying that Aaliyah brought nothing of value beyond whatever physical attraction had captured Nolan's attention. For a moment, Aaliyah felt 15 again, watching bulldozers destroy her grandmother's restaurant while developers in expensive suits explained why progress required sacrifice for people like her. Then she felt Nolan's hand find hers under the table, steady and sure, and something clicked into place. I bring 26 years of knowing what it's like to work for everything you have, she said quietly. I bring connections to communities your son wants to serve. I bring recipes passed down through generations of women who knew how to make miracles out of nothing. She met Helen's eyes directly. And I bring the kind of loyalty that can't be bought or inherited. It has to be earned. The silence stretched between them like a chess match. Finally, Helen smiled, the kind that didn't reach her eyes but acknowledged a worthy opponent. Well, she said, at least you're not boring. After Helen left, Aaliyah and Nolan sat in the hotel bar, both emotionally drained. That went better than expected, Nolan said, ordering whiskey for both of them. Your mother thinks I'm a gold-digging opportunist. My mother thinks everyone's a gold-digging opportunist. The fact that you stood up to her means she'll respect you, even if she doesn't like you. And what do you think? Nolan was quiet for a long moment, studying her face in the dim bar light. I think you're the first person who's ever made me want to be better than I am. The honesty in his voice made her chest tight. Nolan, I'm falling in love with you. The words came out raw, unpolished. I know it's too soon. I know it's complicated, but I needed you to know, before my mother's disapproval gets in your head, before the restaurant opens and everything gets crazy, I needed you to know that this isn't about rebellion or novelty or proving a point. This is about you, Aaliyah. Just you. She leaned across the small table and kissed him, tasting honesty and whiskey and promises neither of them was sure they could keep. But in that moment, in that dim bar with Atlanta glittering beyond the windows, it felt like enough. I'm falling too, she whispered against his lips. God help us both. Have you ever stood up to someone who thought you didn't belong in their world? Someone who made you prove your worth just for existing in the same space? Tell me in the comments about a time you had to fight for your place at the table, because Aaliyah's about to learn that love isn't always enough to bridge the gap between two different worlds. She built walls her entire life, but he didn't try to break them. He simply waited at the door until she was ready to open it herself. The grand opening of Nana's table was 3 weeks away, and Aaliyah hadn't slept in 4 days. Every detail felt crucial. The placement of her grandmother's photos on the brick walls, the exact shade of yellow for the tablecloths, the playlist that would make customers feel welcomed rather than entertained. You're going to work yourself into the hospital, Nolan said, finding her at 2 a.m. arranging and rearranging table settings. It has to be perfect. She moved a fork a quarter inch to the left. People are going to come here expecting failure, expecting to prove that girls like me don't belong in business. Girls like you built this city. He pulled up a chair, watching her hands shake as she adjusted a napkin. Atlanta was built by women who refused to accept limitations. Easy for you to say. You've never been the only black woman in a room full of investors. No, but I've been the only poor kid in rooms full of people who inherited everything they had. He caught her hands, stilling their nervous movement. Breathe, Aaliyah. You've already won. How do you figure? Because 6 months ago, this was just a dream. Now it's real. Tables, chairs, a kitchen full of equipment, staff hired and trained. You built this. She wanted to believe him, but fear had been her companion for so long that trust felt foreign. What if they hate the food? What if nobody comes? Then we'll figure it out. Together. He stood, pulling her up with him. But right now, you need sleep. Real sleep in a real bed. I can't. There's too much. Aaliyah. His voice was firm but gentle. Come home with me tonight. The invitation hung between them, loaded with implications they'd been dancing around for weeks. They'd kissed, sure. Passionate moments stolen between construction meetings and menu planning. But this was different. This was crossing a line that would change everything. Nolan, not for that. Not unless you want to. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. Just because I hate the thought of you lying awake alone, worrying about things you can't control tonight. His penthouse apartment overlooked the city like a promise. Floor-to-ceiling windows framing Atlanta's skyline. Modern furniture that probably cost more than her yearly income. But it was the little things that caught her attention. Books stacked on every surface, a guitar in the corner with worn strings, photos of his family mixed in with business awards. "It's not what I expected," she said, accepting the wine he offered. "What did you expect? Cold. Showing off. Like you were trying to prove how successful you are. And instead it feels like you actually live here." She curled up on his couch, surprised by how comfortable she felt. Like home. Something shifted in his expression. "I've never brought anyone here before. Business associates, sure, but not personally." "Why me?" "Because you see the guitar before you see the price tag." He sat beside her, close enough to touch, but respecting the space between them. "Because you asked about the books instead of the square footage." They talked until sunrise, about childhoods shaped by struggle, about dreams bigger than their circumstances, about the weight of being the first in their families to break certain barriers. Somewhere around 4 a.m., exhaustion won, and Aaliyah dozed against his shoulder. She woke to find herself covered with a cashmere throw, Nolan gone, but coffee brewing in the kitchen. A note on the counter read, "Emergency at the office. Make yourself at home. Key is on the hook if you want to come back tonight." And standing in his kitchen in yesterday's clothes, drinking coffee that probably cost more per pound than she used to spend on groceries, Aaliyah felt the wall she'd built around her heart crack open just a little wider. That evening, she found herself back at his building, key card in hand. The doorman nodded like he'd been expecting her. Nolan was on a conference call when she arrived, pacing his living room with phone pressed to his ear, jacket thrown over a chair, sleeves rolled up. He looked tired, stressed, and completely in his element. When he saw her, his whole demeanor changed. "I'll call you back," he said into the phone, hanging up without waiting for response. "Bad day?" she asked. "Getting better." He moved toward her slowly, like he was afraid she might bolt. "You came back. You left me a key. I hoped you'd use it." The kiss that followed was different from their previous encounters. Less desperate, more certain. His hands tangled in her hair, and she pressed closer, feeling the day's tension leave his body as he held her. "I could get used to this," he murmured against her lips. "What?" "Me ambushing you after work. You being here when I come home." The confession should have scared her, should have triggered every defense mechanism she developed over years of disappointment. Instead, it felt right, like coming home to someone who'd been waiting. "Nolan, too much." He pulled back slightly, reading her face. "We can slow down." "No." She surprised herself with the certainty in her voice. "Not too much. Just new." "Good new or terrifying new?" "Both." He laughed, the sound vibrating through his chest where she pressed against him. "I can work with both." That night, they fell asleep tangled together on his couch, CNN playing softly in the background, her head on his chest, his hand tracing lazy patterns on her back. Not making love, not yet, but sharing something equally intimate. Trust, vulnerability, the kind of peace that came from finding someone who felt like home. When Aaliyah woke at dawn, she realized two things. She was falling harder than she'd ever fallen before, and in exactly 3 weeks, the whole world would be watching to see if their impossible partnership could actually work. The restaurant would open. The critics would come. His mother would judge. Her community would whisper, and everyone would have opinions about the waitress who dared to dream bigger than her circumstances. But lying there in the gray morning light, listening to Nolan's steady breathing, Aaliyah felt something she'd never experienced before. The absolute certainty that whatever came next, she wouldn't face it alone. What does it feel like when someone becomes home before they become yours? When you find yourself planning a future with someone you're still learning to trust? Share in the comments if you've ever felt that beautiful, terrifying moment when walls come down and possibilities open up, because Aaliyah is about to discover that opening her heart might be the biggest risk she's ever taken. She showed up at his door, soaked from the rain, not for charity or business, but because for the first time in her life, she wanted something just for herself. Opening night was tomorrow, and everything that could go wrong had gone wrong. The health inspector found a minor violation that delayed their permit. 2 servers called in sick. The food critic from Atlanta magazine moved up her reservation without warning. And then the rain started, not gentle Atlanta drizzle, but the kind of storm that turns streets into rivers and dreams into disasters. Aaliyah stood outside Nana's table at midnight, water dripping from her hair, watching puddles form where the new floor should have stayed dry. The leak in the ceiling they thought they'd fixed had reopened, right above table 6. The table she'd planned to seat the critic at. Her phone buzzed. Nolan, probably calling to check on last-minute preparations. She let it go to voicemail, then listened to his voice cut through the storm noise. "Hey, I know you're stressed about tomorrow, but whatever's wrong, we'll fix it. Call me back. Or better yet, come over. I'll be up." She shouldn't. She had a million things to handle. Call the contractor, find backup servers, move table arrangements around the water damage. But standing there in her ruined restaurant, watching rain destroy her dreams drop by drop, she realized she didn't want to handle it alone anymore. The cab ride to Buckhead took forever, traffic crawling through flooded intersections. By the time she reached Nolan's building, she was soaked through and shaking, from cold or nerves, she couldn't tell. The doorman took one look at her and waved her through without question. Either Nolan had left instructions, or she looked pathetic enough to warrant sympathy. Probably both. She stood outside his door for a full minute before knocking, suddenly aware of how she must look. Mascara probably smeared, dress clinging to curves she usually kept hidden, vulnerability written across her face like a confession. Nolan opened the door in sweatpants and a t-shirt, hair messed like he'd been running his hands through it. The worry in his eyes shifted to something deeper when he saw her state. "Jesus, Aaliyah. What happened?" "Everything." The word came out broken. "The ceiling leaked, the permit got delayed, my servers are sick, and the critic is coming 12 hours early to watch my dreams drown in a puddle on table 6. He pulled her inside without hesitation, disappearing for a moment before returning with thick towels and one of his shirts. "Get out of those wet clothes before you catch pneumonia." "I'll make coffee." "I don't need coffee. I need miracles." "Then it's lucky I specialize in those." His smile was soft, reassuring. "Bathroom's down the hall. We'll figure this out." In his bathroom, all marble and expensive fixtures that should have intimidated her, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman drowning in circumstances beyond her control. But something in her eyes was different. Instead of the resignation she expected, she saw fight. His shirt fell to her thighs, soft cotton that smelled like him. When she emerged, he was in the kitchen, phone pressed to his ear. "I don't care what time it is, Marcus. I need a contractor at this address in 2 hours. No, not Monday. Now." He looked up as she approached, winking. "Because I'm paying you triple overtime, that's why." He made 4 more calls while she watched, to his cleaning service, to his staffing agency he apparently kept on speed dial, to someone who could expedite permits with a single phone call. Problems that would have taken her days to solve disappeared with Nolan's connections and checkbook. "How?" she asked when he finally hung up. Money talks, especially at 2 a.m. He handed her a mug of coffee that was probably worth more than her car payment. But more importantly, you don't face disasters alone anymore. That's what partners do. Business partners? All kinds of partners. His voice dropped, loaded with meaning. "Aaliyah, there's something I need to tell you." Her stomach clenched. "If you're backing out, I'm in love with you." The words hung between them like lightning, illuminating everything they'd been dancing around for months. She set down her coffee with shaking hands. "Nolan, I know it complicates things. I know the timing is terrible. But sitting here, watching you fall apart over something you've worked so hard for, I realized I can't pretend this is just business anymore." He moved closer, his voice raw with honesty. "I'm completely, stupidly in love with you, and I needed you to know before tomorrow changes everything." She should run, should protect herself and the restaurant and the fragile partnership they'd built. Instead, she found herself moving toward him, drawn by something stronger than fear. "Say something," he whispered. "Please. I am terrified." "Of what?" "Of this. Of you. Of wanting something so much it could destroy me. Her voice cracked. I've never had anything good that lasted, Nolan. People leave. Dreams die. But this us feels too important to lose. Then don't lose it. His hands framed her face, thumbs brushing away tears she didn't realize had fallen. Don't lose us. The kiss was inevitable, desperate, full of everything they'd been holding back. She melted into him, all pretense dropping away. His hands tangled in her damp hair, and she pressed closer, feeling the solid warmth of him through the thin cotton of his shirt. Aaliyah. Her name was a prayer on his lips. Are you sure? Instead of answering with words, she pulled his shirt over her head, standing before him in nothing but his oversized button-down and absolute trust. His breath caught, eyes darkening as they traveled over her face, her throat, the glimpse of skin where his shirt gaped open. You're beautiful. The words came out reverent, like he was seeing something sacred. So damn beautiful. When he lifted her onto the kitchen counter, she wrapped her legs around his waist, pulling him between her thighs. Every touch was electric, his hands on her bare skin, her fingers tracing the muscles of his shoulders, the way he kissed her neck like she was something precious. I want you, she whispered against his ear, feeling him shudder in response. Here. Everywhere. He carried her to his bedroom without breaking the kiss, laying her down on sheets that probably cost more than her monthly rent. But luxury faded to background noise when he looked at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Tell me what you want, he said, voice rough with desire. You. Just you. He undressed her slowly, worshipfully, each revealed inch of skin receiving attention from his hands and mouth. When she reached for him, he caught her hands. Let me, he said simply, let me take care of you. So she did. She let him worship her body like it was art, let him bring her to the edge with patient dedication, let him show her what it felt like to be cherished. When he finally moved above her, she felt complete in a way she'd never imagined possible. I love you too, she gasped as he moved inside her, the admission torn from her soul. Afterward, they lay tangled together, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing patterns on her spine. Dawn was breaking over Atlanta, painting the sky in shades of possibility. The restaurant opens in 12 hours, she said softly. And it's going to be perfect. How do you know? Because you built it. Because you're going to walk in there and show Atlanta what happens when someone refuses to accept limitations. He kissed the top of her head. And because I'll be there, cheering you on from table 6. She lifted her head to look at him. Table 6 has water damage. Had water damage. My guy fixed it 3 hours ago. You're impossible. I'm in love. His smile was soft, satisfied. There's a difference. As she drifted back to sleep in his arms, Aaliyah felt something she'd never experienced before. Complete trust. Tomorrow would bring critics and crowds and the judgment of a city that loved to watch newcomers fail. But whatever happened, she wouldn't face it alone. Have you ever found love in the middle of chaos? When everything was falling apart, except for one person who made it all make sense. Drop a heart in the comments if you know that feeling, because what happens at Nana's table tomorrow will test whether love is strong enough to survive success. Running was the only thing she knew how to do perfectly, until the day's silence hurt more than staying. The opening night of Nana's table was everything Aaliyah had dreamed of and everything she'd feared. Lines wrapped around the block. The food critic from Atlanta magazine cleaned her plate twice. Local news cameras captured customers laughing over comfort food that tasted like home and felt like healing. But success came with a price she hadn't anticipated. Aaliyah Foster, the lucky waitress who caught a millionaire's eye, whispered the woman at table 12, voice just loud enough to carry. I heard she was working 3 jobs before he swooped in to save her, added her companion, stabbing at her mac and cheese like it had personally offended her. From the kitchen doorway, Aaliyah watched customers dissect her life between bites of her grandmother's cornbread. Every table had an opinion about her relationship with Nolan, her worthiness, her motives. The love story that had felt so pure 12 hours ago was being rewritten as a cautionary tale about gold digging and social climbing. Don't listen to them, Marcus said, appearing beside her with another order. People always got something to say about what they don't understand. But it was hard not to listen when the whispers followed her everywhere. At the grocery store, where she overhead, that's her, the one who slept her way into a restaurant. At the bank, where the teller smiled too brightly and asked if her partner would be co-signing. Even at her own restaurant, where customers treated her like a curiosity instead of a chef. The worst part was how the criticism affected her relationship with Nolan. Every public appearance became a performance. Every gesture analyzed for authenticity. When he held her hand at the Chamber of Commerce dinner, she wondered if people thought it was genuine affection or calculated publicity. When he introduced her as his partner, she heard the pause that made it clear which kind of partnership people assumed. 3 weeks after opening, she was hiding in the restaurant's office at midnight, going over receipts that didn't need reviewing, when Nolan found her. "The dinner rush ended 4 hours ago," he said, settling into the chair across from her desk. "What are you really doing here?" "Working." She didn't look up from the numbers that blurred together on the page. "Avoiding," more like. That made her glance up. He looked tired, frustrated, like a man trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. "Avoiding what?" "Me. Us. Home." He leaned forward. "You haven't stayed over in a week. You barely talk during our business meetings. And you flinch every time I touch you in public." "I don't flinch." "You do. Like you're ashamed of what we have." The accusation hit like a slap. "I'm not ashamed. I'm protective." "Of what?" "Of this." She gestured around the office, at the restaurant they'd built together. "Of something that matters too much to let other people destroy with their opinions." "Since when do you care what other people think?" "Since they started calling me your charity case." The words came out bitter, loaded with weeks of accumulated hurt. "Since every article about the restaurant mentions how lucky I am that you discovered me. Since your own mother asked if you were going through a phase." Nolan was quiet for a long moment. "She said that at the charity gala last week, right after she introduced me to her friends as Nolan's little project." Aaliyah closed the laptop harder than necessary. "Maybe she's right. Maybe this whole thing is just you proving how progressive and charitable you can be." "You know that's not true." "Doi." She stood, pacing to the window that overlooked the empty dining room. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like I'm the diversity hire in your life story. The scrappy girl who validates how good and generous you are. That's bullshit, and you know it." "Is it? When was the last time you introduced me to your friends without mentioning that I worked my way up from nothing? When did you stop treating my background like a fascinating novelty?" The silence stretched between them like a chasm. She could see him in the window's reflection, running hands through his hair, struggling with something he couldn't or wouldn't say. "I don't know how to do this," he finally admitted. "I don't know how to love someone and protect them from the world at the same time. I never asked you to protect me. But I want to. Every time someone questions your credentials or implies you didn't earn this, I want to make them disappear. Every time you come home hurt by something someone said, I want to buy the whole damn city and ban anyone who doesn't see how incredible you are." Despite everything, his words made her chest tight with emotion. "You can't solve classism with money, Nolan." "I can try." And that's exactly the problem. She turned to face him. "You think everything can be fixed with enough resources and connections. But some things have to be survived, not solved. So what are you saying? That we just accept that people are going to tear us down?" "I'm saying maybe we need space to figure out who we are when we're not performing for an audience." The words hung between them like a death sentence. She watched understanding dawn on his face, watched hope dim in his eyes. "Space," he repeated flatly. "Just time to think, to breathe, to remember why we started this before everyone else's opinions got in our heads. And if I don't want space, if I think we're stronger together than apart, then you'll have to trust me enough to let me figure that out for myself." He stood slowly, like movement hurt. At the office door, he paused without turning around. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I never saw you as a project. I saw you as the woman who saved me from becoming someone I didn't recognize anymore." After he left, Aaliyah sat in the empty office, surrounded by the success they'd built together and the silence that felt louder than any crowd. She'd gotten what she asked for, space to think, freedom from judgment, time to remember who she was before she became half of a headline. But sitting there alone, she realized space felt a lot like loneliness, and freedom felt suspiciously like loss. Have you ever pushed away something good because you were afraid of losing it? Ever built walls to protect yourself from pain, only to realize you'd locked out love too? Tell me in the comments about a time you chose safety over happiness, because Aaliyah's about to learn that some risks are worth taking, even when the whole world is watching. Some conversations change your life, not because of what's said, but because for the first time, you stop hiding from the truth. 2 weeks of silence stretched between them like scar tissue, present but painful to touch. Aaliyah threw herself into the restaurant with desperate energy, working 16-hour days that left no time for missing the weight of Nolan's hand in hers or the sound of his laugh echoing through his penthouse kitchen. The reviews were phenomenal. Reservations booked solid for 2 months out. Food Network wanted to feature Nana's Table in an upcoming segment about Atlanta's rising culinary stars. By every measure that mattered, she was living her dream. So why did success taste like ash in her mouth? She was closing up on a Thursday night when she found him sitting at table 6, the same table where his disastrous blind date had started everything. He looked different, thinner maybe, or just tired. The kind of tired that came from sleepless nights and unanswered questions. "We're closed," she said, though her heart raced at the sight of him. "I know. I waited." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Will you sit with me? Please." Every instinct told her to keep the barrier of the counter between them, to maintain the distance she'd insisted they needed. Instead, she found herself sliding into the opposite chair, hyper-aware of how small the table felt with both of them at it. "How have you been?" he asked. "Busy. You?" "Terrible." His honesty was startling in its simplicity. Absolutely terrible. "Nolan, let me go first. I've been practicing this speech for 2 weeks." He leaned forward, hands clasped on the table between them. "You were right about some things. I did use your background as proof of my character. I did get defensive when people questioned us instead of trusting you to handle it yourself. And I definitely tried to solve systemic problems with personal solutions." She wanted to interrupt, to tell him it wasn't all his fault, but something in his expression stopped her. "But you were wrong about the most important thing," he continued. "You think I fell in love with your story. Poor girl makes good, American dream realized. That's not what happened, Aaliyah. I fell in love with your mind. The way you see solutions where other people see problems. The way you remember every customer's name and favorite dish because you actually care about feeding people, not just serving them." His voice grew rougher with emotion. "I fell in love with your laugh when you're really amused, not just being polite. With the way you argue with the morning news like the anchors can hear you. With how you sing off-key in the shower and don't care because you're happy." Tears she'd been holding back for 2 weeks finally spilled over. "Stop. I can't. Because I also fell in love with your strength. Not the kind that comes from struggle, though you have that too, but the kind that comes from choosing hope when cynicism would be easier. You could have let this city make you bitter, but instead you decided to make it better. You don't understand what it's like," she said, voice breaking, "to have everything you've worked for dismissed as luck or charity. To have people look at us and see the transaction instead of love. You're right. I don't understand that specific pain." He reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hand. "But I understand what it's like to have people reduce you to your bank account. To wonder if someone loves you or loves what you can provide. The difference is, my doubts were never justified. Yours might be." That stopped her short. "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe I did treat you like a project at first. Maybe I was so proud of myself for seeing your potential that I forgot to see you." His eyes met hers, raw with vulnerability. "Maybe I fell in love with the idea of rescuing someone before I fell in love with who you actually are." The admission hung between them like a confession, painful and necessary. "And now," she whispered, "now I know the difference. Because these 2 weeks without you, I didn't miss the story or the cause or the way you made me look. I missed you. Your voice on my voicemail. Your toothbrush next to mine. The way you steal the covers and then complain about being cold." Despite everything, she almost smiled. I don't steal covers. You absolutely steal covers. His own smile was sad, hopeful. The question is whether you miss me too, or if you're happier without the complications I bring to your life. She studied his face, really looked at him for the first time since their fight. He looked like a man who'd been asking himself hard questions and not liking all the answers. Like someone who'd grown up in the space between them. I miss you, she admitted. But I'm scared, Nolan. Scared of losing myself in us. Scared of people always seeing me as the woman you elevated instead of the woman I made myself into. What if I told you I found a way to change that? What do you mean? He pulled out his phone, scrolling to something before turning the screen toward her. I've been thinking about what you said about solving versus surviving. About wanting to earn your success instead of accepting it. On the screen was a news article. Tech CEO Nolan Winters announces new investment fund focused on minority-owned small businesses. She read quickly, her mouth falling open. You're starting a fund? We are. If you want to be my partner. Real partner, equal decisions. Your name on everything. His voice picked up speed, excitement bleeding through. The idea is to invest in businesses that banks overlook. Not charity, not handouts. Strategic partnerships with people who have vision but need capital. Nolan, you be the face of it. The one who meets with potential partners, who understands their challenges because you've lived them. I'd handle the money side, but you'd handle the people side. She stared at the article, seeing her future rewritten in black and white. This is huge. It's also completely separate from us personally. If we crash and burn romantically, the fund continues. Your career continues. Your independence remains intact. And if we don't crash and burn, his smile was tentative, hopeful. Then we build something together that's about more than just us. We help other people write their own success stories instead of just living ours. The vision was intoxicating. Using their resources to change systems instead of just surviving them, creating opportunities instead of just taking them. But more than that, it felt like partnership in the truest sense. Not him rescuing her, but both of them rescuing others. There's something else, he said quietly. I've been seeing a therapist. What? Dr. Martinez. She specializes in relationships across class differences. Turns out I have some pretty deep issues around money and worth, and proving myself through other people's success. His laugh was self-deprecating. Who knew? Nolan, I don't want to love you the wrong way, Aaliyah. I want to love you the way you deserve. As an equal, as a partner, as someone whose worth has nothing to do with my recognition of it. She reached across the table then, finally closing the distance between them. His fingers intertwined with hers like they'd been waiting. I've been seeing someone too, she admitted. Dr. Williams. Apparently, I have trust issues and a fear of dependency that predates our relationship by about 20 years. And she says the bravest thing I can do is stay and fight for what I want instead of running when things get complicated. What do you want? You. The word came out strong, certain. Us. He brought their joined hands to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. Even if people still talk, even if your success gets attributed to our relationship. Let them talk. I know what I've earned, and so do you. That's what matters. So we're doing this? The fund, the relationship, the whole complicated mess. We're doing this. She leaned across the table, meeting him halfway for a kiss that tasted like forgiveness and felt like coming home. But I have one condition. Name it. Next time we fight it out instead of fighting alone. Deal. As they locked up the restaurant together, Aaliyah felt something she hadn't experienced in weeks. Certainty. Not the naive kind that ignored complications, but the mature kind that acknowledged them and chose love anyway. What does it mean to love someone enough to grow for them? To admit your flaws and work to become the partner they deserve. Share in the comments if you've ever had to choose between pride and partnership, because what comes next will test whether love is strong enough to survive not just external pressure, but internal change. She invited him to her world not as a visitor, but as a challenge. Prove you want me, not just what I represent. The investment fund launched 6 weeks later with a press conference that changed everything. Instead of Millionaire's girlfriend, headlines called Aaliyah co-founder and visionary. Instead of questions about how she'd landed a rich man, reporters asked about her strategy for identifying promising minority-owned businesses. But the real test came afterward, when the cameras stopped rolling and real life resumed. "My apartment," Aaliyah said as they left the press conference, surprising them both. "Tonight, just us." Nolan raised an eyebrow. "Not the penthouse. I want you in my space. My terms." She studied his face. "Unless that makes you uncomfortable." "Nothing about you makes me uncomfortable. We'll see." Her apartment hadn't changed. Same secondhand furniture. Same careful patches where the walls showed wear. Same photos of her grandmother mixed with dreams written on sticky notes and taped to the bathroom mirror. But bringing Nolan there felt different than it had before. Less like showing him poverty, more like sharing her truth. He moved through her space slowly, taking in details he'd missed during their early, nervous encounters. The books she bought secondhand and read until the spines cracked. The spice collection organized with military precision. The photo of her parents she kept face down because looking at their disappointed faces hurt too much. "This is really you," he said, settling on her couch like he belonged there. "Disappointed?" "Amazed." He pulled her down beside him. "You built a whole life from nothing but determination and hope. Most people couldn't do what you've done. Most people don't have to." "No, but most people who do have to don't succeed like you have." She curled against his side, finally allowing herself to relax. "The fund is going to work, isn't it? It's going to change lives." His hand traced patterns on her arm, starting with ours. Something in his voice made her look up. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I love you more now than I did 6 months ago. More than I did yesterday. More than I thought possible." His fingers tilted her chin up. "And I want to spend the rest of my life proving that to you." "Nolan." "Not a proposal. Not yet. Just a promise." He kissed her forehead, soft and reverent. "I'm going to love you so well that you never doubt it again. Starting right now." The kiss that followed was different from their previous encounters. Deeper, more intentional. Like he was memorizing the taste of her, the sound of her sigh, the way her body curved into his. "Show me," she whispered against his lips. "Show me what forever feels like." He took his time undressing her, hands reverent on skin he'd mapped before but was discovering anew. When he reached for the lamp, she caught his wrist. "Leave it on. I want to see you see me." His eyes darkened, pupils dilating as she pulled his shirt over his head. In the harsh light of her thrift store lamp, there was no hiding. Not the scar on her shoulder from a childhood accident. Not the stretch marks she'd always been self-conscious about. Not the way her hands shook slightly as she traced the planes of his chest. "You're perfect," he breathed, catching her hands and pressing them flat against his heart. "Absolutely perfect." "I'm not. I'm difficult and stubborn, and I have trust issues that." He silenced her with a kiss, deep and consuming. "You're perfect for me." When he laid her back on her narrow bed, the same bed she'd slept alone in for years, she felt claimed in the best possible way. His mouth traveled her body like a prayer, worshiping every inch until she was gasping his name and pulling him up to meet her lips. "I love you," she said as he moved above her, the words torn from her soul. "I love you so much it terrifies me." "Good." He settled between her thighs, eyes locked on hers. "Because I plan to terrify you with how much I love you for the next 60 years. When he moved inside her, it was with a reverence that made her eyes fill with tears. This wasn't just physical. It was a promise, a claiming, a surrender that went both ways. "Mine," she gasped as he found the rhythm that made her arch beneath him. "Yours," he agreed, voice rough with emotion. "Always yours." They moved together like they were writing a new language, one that spoke of partnership and passion and the kind of love that survived external pressure because it was built on internal strength. When she shattered around him, crying his name, he followed her over the edge with a groan that sounded like gratitude. Afterward, they lay tangled on her small bed, bodies slick with sweat, hearts beating in sync. "That was," she started. "Different. Good different. Everything different." He traced lazy patterns on her back. Like we were finally meeting each other as equals instead of trying to prove we belong together. She propped herself up on his chest, studying his face in the lamplight. Do you think we do? Belong together? I think we choose to belong together. Every day, despite what anyone else thinks. His hand cupped her face. And I choose you, Aaliyah. Every version of you. The successful businesswoman, the scared girl from the South Side, the woman who steals covers and argues with morning television. I don't steal. You absolutely steal covers. He rolled them over, pinning her beneath him with a grin. But I'll share them with you for the rest of our lives if you'll let me. Just the covers. Everything. Dreams, fears, success, failure, good days, terrible days, and every day in between. She pulled him down for another kiss, this one soft and sweet and full of promises she was finally ready to make. Hours later, as dawn crept through her bedroom windows, they lay pressed together on her narrow mattress. A millionaire CEO and a girl from the projects who dared to dream bigger than her circumstances. I should probably get used to sleeping in a real bed, she murmured against his chest. Or I could get used to sleeping anywhere you are. Even here, in my tiny apartment with thin walls and neighbors who play music too loud. Especially here. He tightened his arms around her. This is where you chose to love me back. This is where we decided to stop being careful and start being real. Real is messier than careful. Real is also better. As she drifted back to sleep, Aaliyah felt something she'd never experienced before. Complete peace with her choices. She'd chosen love over safety, partnership over protection, and the man sleeping beside her had chosen the same. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, investors to meet, businesses to evaluate, critics who would never stop questioning their legitimacy. But tonight, in her small bed in her small apartment, they had everything that mattered. Have you ever had to choose between playing it safe and going all in? Between protecting yourself and trusting someone else with your whole heart? Tell me in the comments about the moment you decided to stop being careful and start being real, because what happens next will prove that real love doesn't just survive challenges. It transforms them into stepping stones. People say love bridges different worlds, but nobody tells you how terrifying it is to stand in the middle, wondering if the bridge will hold. The Winters family Christmas party was exactly what Aaliyah expected. Crystal chandeliers, catered cuisine that cost more than most people's rent, and conversations that danced around money without ever mentioning actual numbers. What she didn't expect was how naturally she'd fit into it. "So you're the famous Aaliyah," said Nolan's cousin James, approaching with champagne and genuine curiosity. Nolan hasn't stopped talking about the fund since it launched. Hopefully good things. Revolutionary things. My wife's been trying to get funding for her sustainable fashion line for years. Banks keep turning her down because they don't understand the market. Have her call our office Monday. We're specifically looking for businesses like that. Within an hour, she'd collected 6 business cards and 3 potential partnerships. Helen Winters watched from across the room with an expression Aaliyah couldn't quite read. Not approval exactly, but something close to respect. "You're working the room like you were born to it," Nolan murmured, appearing at her elbow with fresh drinks. "Your family's not what I expected." "What did you expect? Snobby rich people who'd look down on me." She accepted the champagne, hyper-aware of his hand on the small of her back. "Instead, they're treating me like an expert. Because you're an expert. You understand markets and communities they've never thought about." His voice dropped lower. "Also, you look incredible in that dress." Heat climbed her neck. The dress had been a splurge, deep emerald green that complemented her skin tone and fit like it was designed specifically for her curves. Nolan's reaction when she'd walked out of his bedroom, wearing it, had been worth every penny. "Nolan, dear, could you come here for a moment?" Helen's voice cut across the party chatter. He squeezed Aaliyah's hand. "I'll be right back." She watched him cross the room to where his mother stood with a distinguished older man she didn't recognize. Their conversation looked serious, Helen's gesture sharp with emphasis. "That's Senator Morrison," said a voice behind her. Aaliyah turned to find Helen Winters approaching, champagne in hand, expression unreadable. "Mrs. Winters." "Helen, please. We're family now, aren't we?" The word should have been welcoming, but something in Helen's tone made Aaliyah's shoulders tense. "Are we? Well, That depends entirely on you, doesn't it? Helen sipped her champagne, studying Aaliyah over the rim. The senator is very interested in the fund. He's been looking for ways to support minority business development that don't look like political pandering. And, and he's concerned about optics. A white CEO and his black girlfriend starting a fund to help disadvantaged businesses. Helen's smile was sharp. People might see it as performative. The words hit like ice water. Is that what you see it as? What I see is irrelevant. What matters is public perception. And right now, the public sees a love story. Sweet, inspiring, but ultimately personal. Helen moved closer, voice dropping. If you want this fund to be taken seriously, you need to step out of Nolan's shadow. What are you suggesting? That you become the face of the fund. Not co-founder with your boyfriend, but CEO in your own right. Nolan can be the silent partner, providing capital while you provide leadership. Aaliyah's pulse quickened. And you think that would work? I think it's the only thing that will work. As long as you're seen as Nolan's protege, every success will be attributed to him. But if you're the CEO, if you're the one giving interviews and making decisions, Helen's smile was calculating. Then you become the story. Before Aaliyah could respond, Nolan returned, expression tight with something that looked like frustration. Everything okay? Aaliyah asked. Fine. Just politics. He glanced between her and his mother. What are you two talking about? Business strategy, Helen said smoothly. I was just telling Aaliyah how impressed the senator is with the fund's potential. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversations and introductions, but Aaliyah's mind kept returning to Helen's words. Step out of Nolan's shadow. Become the story. Later, in the privacy of Nolan's car, she finally broached the subject. Your mother thinks I should be the CEO of the fund. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. She said that. She thinks it would be better for optics. Less like charity, more like authentic leadership. And what do you think? I think she might be right. The admission came out quietly, but with conviction. Every interview we do, every article that gets written, focuses on you as the visionary and me as the inspiring partner. What if we flip that? Nolan was quiet for several blocks, Atlanta's nighttime skyline flashing past the windows. It would mean giving up control, he said finally. Not giving up, sharing differently. You'd still be involved, still make strategic decisions. But publicly, I'd be the leader. You'd be taking all the risk. If the fund fails, it would be your failure. And if it succeeds, it would be my success. She turned to face him. Isn't that what I've been fighting for all along? The chance to succeed or fail on my own merits. He pulled into his building's garage, cutting the engine before turning to meet her gaze. Are you asking because you want it, or because my mother convinced you it's necessary? Both. Her honesty surprised them both. I want to lead, Nolan. I want to be the person making decisions, setting strategy, representing our values. But I also think Helen's right about perception. As long as I'm seen as your partner first and a businesswoman second, we'll never change the narrative. And us? How does this affect us? It doesn't have to affect us at all. Unless... She studied his face, looking for signs of wounded ego or threatened masculinity. Unless you need to be the public face of our success. His laugh was rueful. You really think I'm that insecure? I think you're used to being in charge. I think you've built your identity around being the guy who fixes things and saves companies. And I think letting your girlfriend become your boss might be harder than you're admitting. The silence stretched between them, loaded with implications neither wanted a voice. You're not wrong, he said finally, about any of it. I do like being in control. I do tie my worth to my professional success and the idea of you not needing me anymore. He ran a hand through his hair. It's terrifying. I'll always need you, just not the same way. How then? The way partners need each other, not to be saved or fixed or elevated, but to be supported and challenged and loved. She reached for his hand. I need you to believe in me enough to let me lead, even when it's uncomfortable, even when people assume I got the job because I'm sleeping with the investor. They'll say that anyway. Then let them. We'll know the truth. He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm. CEO Aaliyah Foster. It has a nice ring to it. You're really okay with this? I'm proud of you for wanting it. And I'm proud that you trust me enough to ask for it. His eyes met hers in the dim garage lighting. Besides, someone's got to keep the boss satisfied. The heat in his voice made her stomach flutter. Is that your new job description? Satisfying the CO? Among other things. He leaned across the console, mouth brushing hers. I could think of worse career changes. The kiss deepened, champagne and possibility on their tongues, until the parking garage's security lights flickered impatiently around them. Take me upstairs, she whispered against his lips. I want to celebrate with my silent partner. You're a very supportive, silent partner, he corrected, already moving to get out of the car. The most supportive, she agreed, following him toward the elevator with a smile that felt like victory. As the elevator climbed toward his penthouse, Aaliyah felt the weight of change settling around them like a new skin. Tomorrow, she'd call the lawyers and restructure the fund with herself as CEO. Tomorrow, she'd step fully into the leadership role she'd been preparing for her entire life. But tonight, she was just a woman in love with a man brave enough to let her shine, even when it meant stepping back from the spotlight himself. Have you ever had to choose between staying comfortable and becoming who you're meant to be? Ever asked someone you love to support your growth, even when it changed the dynamic between you? Share in the comments about a time someone believed in your potential enough to step aside and let you claim it, because what comes next will test whether their partnership is strong enough to handle success on her terms. Have you ever had to choose between staying comfortable and becoming who you're meant to be? Ever asked someone you love to support your growth, even when it changed the dynamic between you? Share in the comments about a time someone believed in your potential enough to step aside and let you claim it, because what comes next will test whether their partnership is strong enough to handle success on her terms. She grew up believing survival was the best she could hope for, until the day someone handed her the power to change the system that nearly broke her. 6 months as CEO of the Minority Business Development Fund transformed Aaliyah from local success story to national figure. Forbes featured her on their 30 Under 30 list. Harvard Business School invited her to speak. The White House called about a potential advisory position. But success came with complications she hadn't anticipated. The Peterson account is pulling out, Marcus said, sliding a letter across her desk. They're concerned about the fund's political implications. Aaliyah scanned the corporate speak that boiled down to one thing. They didn't want to be associated with a fund that explicitly supported minority businesses. Too controversial in the current climate. How much? She asked, though she already knew it would hurt. $2 million. And they're not the first. We've lost 4 major investors this month. The numbers made her stomach clench. The fund was sustainable, but barely. Losing investors meant fewer businesses they could help, fewer dreams they could nurture into reality. What's Nolan's take on this? Marcus asked. He doesn't know yet. She folded the letter, tucking it into her desk drawer with the others. And he doesn't need to know. This is my problem to solve. But keeping secrets from Nolan was harder than she'd expected. At dinner that night, his presence felt like a spotlight on her worry. You're quiet tonight, he said, refilling her wine glass. Everything okay with the fund? Fine. Just thinking about expansion strategies. Not exactly a lie, but not the whole truth either. Want to bounce ideas off me? I know I'm just a silent partner now, but it's handled. The words came out sharper than intended. I need to figure this out myself. He studied her face, clearly sensing there was more to the story. But instead of pushing, he simply nodded. Okay. That was the thing about Nolan that still surprised her. His ability to step back when she needed space, even when his instincts probably screamed to fix whatever was wrong. The next morning brought worse news. Atlanta Business Journal ran a front-page story questioning the fund's practices, suggesting that their focus on minority-owned businesses constituted reverse discrimination. The article quoted anonymous investors expressing concern about the fund's agenda-driven approach. Aaliyah's phone started ringing at 6 a.m. They're trying to destroy you, said Maya, her best friend and now the fund's communications director. This isn't journalism, it's character assassination. Can we respond? Set the record straight. We could try. But once this narrative gets out there, Maya's sigh was audible through the phone. It's going to be a fight. By noon, 3 more investors had called to reevaluate their commitment. Cable news picked up the story, turning her business decisions into political talking points. Conservative outlets painted her as a radical activist using investment funds to push a social agenda. Liberal outlets defended her but focused more on her inspiring personal story than her business acumen. Nolan found her in her office at 8 p.m., still fielding damage control calls. "Go home," he said after she hung up with yet another reporter. "Can't. Too much to handle." "Aaliyah." His voice was firm. "Go home. Shower. Eat something that isn't vending machine coffee. Then we'll figure out how to fight this. You think I'm going to let them tear down what we built without a fight?" The relief that flooded through her was immediate and overwhelming. She'd been carrying the weight of the crisis alone, trying to prove she could handle CEO responsibilities without leaning on his resources or connections. But sitting in her office, watching the fund's reputation get shredded in real time, she realized that independence didn't have to mean isolation. "I've been getting calls all day," she admitted. "Investors pulling out, potential partners backing away. They're making it sound like we're running some kind of discriminatory scheme instead of trying to level the playing field." "How bad is it financially?" "Bad. Not catastrophic yet, but trending that way." She rubbed her temples, feeling a headache building behind her eyes. "I keep thinking about all the businesses we won't be able to help if this continues. All the dreams that'll die because people decided we're too controversial to support." Nolan was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. "What if we flip the script?" he said finally. "What do you mean?" "What if instead of defending against their attacks, we went on offense? Show the public exactly what the fund has accomplished. Put faces and stories to the businesses we've supported. A PR campaign, a truth campaign. Let people see Maria Santos, whose food truck became 3 restaurants employing 40 people. Let them meet James Wilson, whose tech startup is revolutionizing accessibility software. Show them that investing in minority businesses isn't about politics. It's about recognizing talent that traditional investors overlook." The idea sparked something in Aaliyah's chest. A documentary? A social media campaign, speaking tours, whatever it takes. His eyes were bright with possibility. "We tell our story before they finish writing theirs. That would cost money we might not have if more investors pull out. Then we find new investors, better investors, people who believe in what we're doing instead of just looking for safe returns." She stood up, pacing to the window that overlooked downtown Atlanta. The city sparkled below, full of dreamers and strivers, and people who deserve the same chances she'd been given. "It's a risk," she said. "Everything worthwhile is a risk. If it backfires, if we lose more investors, then we start over. But at least we'll have tried." He moved to stand behind her, hands settling on her shoulders. "You've never backed down from a fight in your life. Don't start now." She leaned back against his chest, feeling some of the day's tension ease. "When did you become the optimistic one in this relationship?" "When I fell in love with someone who taught me that giving up isn't an option." That night, they worked until dawn, sketching out a campaign strategy that would put the fund's success stories front and center. By the time the sun rose over Atlanta, they had a plan that felt like a declaration of war. "You sure about this?" Aaliyah asked as they finally headed home. "Once we do this, there's no going back. We'll be taking a public stand that some people will never forgive." "Good." His smile was fierce. "Let them show their true colors. We'll show ours." 3 days later, the fund's new website launched with video testimonials from 50 business owners whose lives had been changed by their investments. Social media lit up with #FundedByFaithStories. Local news stations requested interviews. The attacks didn't stop, but now they had ammunition to fight back. Standing in her office, watching engagement metrics climb as their stories spread across the internet, Aaliyah felt something she hadn't experienced since the controversy started. Hope. "Think it's working?" Maya asked, showing her the latest Twitter analytics. "It's working." Aaliyah's smile was confident for the first time in weeks. They wanted to make this about politics. Instead, we made it about people. Her phone buzzed with a text from Nolan. "Proud of you. Always. Dinner tonight to celebrate." She typed back, "Only if you're buying. CEOs are expensive dates." His response came immediately, "Worth every penny." Have you ever had to fight for something you believed in when the whole world seemed against you? Ever had to choose between playing it safe and standing up for your values? Tell me in the comments about a time you refused to back down from what was right, because what happens next will prove that sometimes the biggest battles lead to the most important victories. The world loves to tear down what it doesn't understand. A street girl with a rich man, a powerful CEO with a nobody from Brooklyn. But what they didn't know was that judgment only made them hold on tighter. The death threat arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipped under the fund's office door like a grocery store flyer. Aaliyah found it when she came in early to prep for a television interview that could make or break their reputation. "You need to see this," Marcus said, his face grim as he handed her the envelope. The message was simple, typed on plain paper: "Stop promoting your anti-white agenda, or face the consequences. This is your only warning." Aaliyah's hands shook as she read it twice, then a third time, as if the words might change with repetition. "We're calling the police," Marcus said. "No." The response was immediate, instinctive. "We're not giving them that satisfaction." "Aaliyah, this is serious. You think I don't know that?" She folded the letter, tucking it into her desk drawer with forced calm. "But the second we make this public, the story becomes about the threat instead of our work." That's exactly what they want. Her phone rang. Nolan, checking in before her interview like he had every morning since the controversy started. "Ready to charm Atlanta into submission?" he asked, and she could hear his smile through the phone. She almost told him about the letter. Almost let him sweep in with security teams and legal threats and all the protective instincts that money could buy. Instead, she found herself saying, "Ready as I'll ever be. You're going to be brilliant. You always are." The television studio felt like a battlefield disguised as a talk show set. Aaliyah sat across from Janet Morrison, Atlanta's most notorious interviewer, knowing that millions of viewers would form opinions about her and the fund based on the next 30 minutes. "Let's address the elephant in the room," Janet said, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Critics say your fund practices reverse discrimination. How do you respond to accusations that you're excluding qualified white business owners?" Aaliyah had practiced this answer 100 times, but sitting under the hot studio lights, she felt the familiar flutter of nerves. "Janet, in the past year, we've invested in 53 businesses. 41 were minority-owned, 12 weren't. We invest based on potential, not demographics. The difference is that we look for potential in places traditional investors ignore. But your stated mission specifically targets minority entrepreneurs, because minority entrepreneurs face systemic barriers that others don't. Banks approve loans for white-owned businesses at twice the rate of black-owned businesses, even with identical credit scores and business plans. We're not excluding anyone. We're including people who've been excluded for generations." Janet leaned forward, sensing weakness. "Some investors have called your approach divisive. They're pulling funding because they feel you're prioritizing politics over profits." This was the moment Aaliyah had dreaded, the question that could destroy everything they'd built. She thought about the letter in her desk drawer, about the businesses they'd already had to turn away due to reduced funding, about all the dreams that hung in the balance. Then she thought about her grandmother, who'd built a restaurant with nothing but determination and secondhand equipment, only to watch developers tear it down for luxury condos. About every person who'd ever been told they didn't belong, didn't deserve, didn't matter. You know what's divisive, Janet? Pretending that systemic inequality doesn't exist. Pretending that access to capital has ever been equal in this country. Her voice grew stronger with each word. "I'm not prioritizing politics over profits. I'm prioritizing people over prejudice. And if that makes some investors uncomfortable, then they weren't the right partners for us anyway. But surely you can see how some people might view your relationship with Nolan Winters as opportunistic." The question hit like a slap, exactly as it was designed to. Aaliyah felt heat climb her neck, felt the familiar sting of having her personal life dissected for public consumption. My relationship with Nolan has nothing to do with my qualifications to run this fund, she said, her voice steady despite the fury building in her chest. I didn't sleep my way into this position, Janet. I earned it. With a business degree, 10 years of industry experience, and results that speak for themselves. Of course, but no buts. I'm tired of having my competence questioned because I happen to love someone who believed in my vision before anyone else did. Aaliyah leaned forward, meeting Janet's gaze directly. You want to know what's really divisive? The assumption that a black woman can't achieve success without a man's help. The idea that my worth is tied to who I'm dating instead of what I've accomplished. The interview continued for another 15 minutes, but Aaliyah knew that exchange would be the soundbite that defined the segment. Walking out of the studio, she felt simultaneously drained and energized, like she'd fought a battle and wasn't sure if she'd won or lost. Her phone was buzzing with notifications before she reached her car. Social media had erupted with clips from the interview, hashtags forming and splitting like cells dividing. Hashtag Aaliyah Told the Truth was trending alongside hashtag Reverse Racism. Support and condemnation flooded her mentions in equal measure. Nolan was waiting in her office when she got back, his expression unreadable as he watched news coverage on her computer screen. That was, he started, a disaster? Magnificent. He stood, moving toward her with purpose. You were absolutely magnificent. Before she could respond, he was kissing her, deep and desperate, like he was trying to pour all his pride and love and admiration into the connection between them. I'm so proud of you, he murmured against her lips. So damn proud, even though I probably just killed our investor relations. Especially because of that. He pulled back to meet her eyes. You stood up for what's right, even when it would have been easier to give them the answers they wanted to hear. Nolan, there's something else. She reached for her desk drawer, retrieving the letter with reluctant hands. This came this morning. His expression went deadly serious as he read the threat. We're calling the FBI. I already called them, but I didn't want it to distract from the interview. Jesus, Aaliyah, you could have been hurt. You should have told me immediately. So you could do what? Wrap me in bubble wrap and hide me away. She shook her head. This is exactly what they want. To make us scared, to make us back down. I won't give them that power. And if they escalate, if this becomes more than just threats, then we deal with it. Together. She took his hands in hers. I need you to trust me to handle this my way, even if it scares you. He was quiet for a long moment, conflict playing across his face. You're asking me to watch someone threaten the woman I love and do nothing. I'm asking you to trust that the woman you love is strong enough to handle herself. I know you're strong enough. That doesn't make this easier. That night, they made love with desperate intensity, as if physical connection could shield them from the storm building outside. Aaliyah lost herself in the feel of his hands on her skin, the sound of her name on his lips, the way he held her afterward like she was something precious that might disappear. Whatever happens, she whispered in the darkness, promise me we don't let them change who we are. Promise, he said, pulling her closer. But you have to promise me something too. What? Promise you won't face this alone. Not the threats, not the criticism, not any of it. We're partners, remember? Partners, she agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss. Outside, Atlanta slept fitfully, social media continuing its debate about race and business and whether a waitress from the South Side deserved the success she'd claimed. But in Nolan's bedroom, wrapped in his arms and each other's promises, Aaliyah felt invincible. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new attacks, new tests of their resolve. But tonight, they had love and trust and the unshakable belief that what they were building mattered more than what others thought of it. Have you ever stood up for what you believed in, even when it cost you something important? Ever had to choose between safety and integrity? Share in the comments about a time you refused to back down from your values, because what comes next will test whether love and principle are enough to survive when the whole world is watching. 1 year ago, she stood in a clinic ready to sell her body to save her mother. Today, she stood on a stage ready to change a system that forced women like her to make impossible choices. The ribbon-cutting ceremony for the fund's new headquarters drew a crowd that spilled onto the sidewalk and around the block. Local business owners, aspiring entrepreneurs, politicians, and reporters all came to witness what had become more than just an office opening. It was a statement. Aaliyah stood at the podium, looking out at faces that represented dreams deferred and dreams realized. In the front row sat Maria Santos, whose food truck empire now employed 60 people. Beside her, James Wilson, whose accessibility app had been acquired by Google for 8 figures. Behind them, dozens of other business owners whose success stories had become the fund's greatest weapon against its critics. 18 months ago, I was a waitress with a dream and no way to make it real. Aaliyah began, her voice carrying across the crowd without amplification. Today, we've invested in over 100 businesses, created 3,000 jobs, and proved that opportunity doesn't care about your zip code. It just needs someone willing to provide it. Applause rippled through the crowd, but Aaliyah held up a hand for quiet. But this isn't about me or about any individual success story. This is about changing the rules of the game, about ensuring that the next girl from the South Side, the next immigrant with an idea, the next veteran with a vision doesn't have to wait for someone to believe in them. They can believe in themselves and know that resources will be available when they're ready. She found Nolan in the crowd, standing toward the back with his mother, both of them beaming with pride. Helen Winters had become an unexpected ally, using her social connections to bring in investors who cared more about impact than optics. They tried to tear us down. Aaliyah continued, her voice growing stronger. Called us divisive, discriminatory, dangerous. But you know what we really are? We're proof that when you give people a chance, they don't just succeed, they soar. The applause this time was thunderous, sustained, energizing. As it died down, Aaliyah felt the weight of the moment settling around her like a mantle of responsibility and possibility. After the ceremony, as the crowd mingled inside the sleek new offices, Nolan found her in the executive suite that still smelled like fresh paint and new beginnings. "How does it feel?" he asked, sliding his arms around her waist from behind. "Surreal. Like I'm living someone else's life." "It's your life. You built this." She leaned back against his chest, looking out at the Atlanta skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. "We built this. I provided capital. You provided vision, leadership, and the courage to fight for it when things got ugly." The past year flashed through her memory. The late nights, the hostile interviews, the death threats that had eventually stopped coming, the investors who tried to dictate their strategy and been politely but firmly refused. "Remember when you asked what I wanted?" she said softly. "In the restaurant that first night. You asked what I wanted. I remember. I wanted to matter. To build something that lasted longer than a shift or a paycheck or someone else's opinion of my worth." His arms tightened around her. Mission accomplished. Before she could respond, Maya knocked on the office door. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent." The someone turned out to be Dr. Elizabeth Chun, the venture capitalist who'd been publicly critical of the fund since its launch. She stood in Aaliyah's office looking uncomfortable, a stark contrast to the confident dismissal she'd shown in previous media appearances. "Ms. Foster, thank you for seeing me without an appointment." "Dr. Chun, this is unexpected. I owe you an apology." The words came out stilted, like they'd been practiced, but were still difficult to say. "I was wrong about your fund, about your methods, about your motives." Aaliyah gestured to the chairs in front of her desk, professional mask sliding into place. "What changed your mind?" "My daughter. She's been following your work, using your business development resources for her sustainable fashion startup. Last week, she told me she'd applied for funding from your program." Dr. Chin's smile was rueful. Apparently, she'd been trying to get meetings with traditional investors for 2 years. "You approved her application in 3 weeks. We move quickly when we see potential." "Yes, you do. And in her case, you saw potential that I missed completely." Dr. Chun leaned forward. "I came here to ask if you consider a strategic partnership. My firm has capital and con." The offer was everything Aaliyah had dreamed of: legitimacy, resources, the ability to help thousands more businesses across the country. It was also dangerous, the kind of rapid expansion that could dilute their mission or compromise their values. I need guarantees, she said carefully, about maintaining our investment criteria, our community focus, our independence. Of course, I wouldn't expect otherwise. In fact, I'd insist on it. Dr. Chin's expression was serious. The last thing I want is to change what you've built. I want to help you build more of it. After Dr. Chin left, Aaliyah sat in her office as Atlanta's lights began to twinkle in the gathering dusk. The decision felt enormous. Accept the partnership and risk losing control of their mission, or stay small and limit their impact. Nolan found her there an hour later, still staring out at the city. Penny for your thoughts? She told him about Dr. Chin's offer, watching his face for signs of what he thought she should do. It's your call, he said when she finished. But whatever you decide, I'm behind you. Even if I choose to stay small, to turn down the chance to go national. Even then, you've never made a decision based on fear, and I don't expect you to start now. She turned in her chair to face him fully. And if I choose to expand, to take the risk, then we'll make sure it's the right kind of risk. The kind that honors what we've built while creating space for more. That night, as they celebrated with dinner at Nana's table, still packed despite having been open for over a year, Aaliyah felt the pieces of her future clicking into place like a puzzle finally completing itself. To partnerships, Nolan said, raising his wine glass. To possibilities, she countered. To us. To us. The restaurant hummed around them with conversations and laughter and the satisfied sounds of people enjoying food made with love. It was exactly what she'd envisioned when she'd first walked into that empty building. A place where community gathered, where dreams were nourished along with bodies, where everyone was welcome at the table. Looking across at Nolan, seeing pride and love and absolute faith in her judgment reflected in his eyes, Aaliyah realized she'd built something even better than she'd originally dreamed. Not just a successful business or a thriving fund, but a life where she was valued, supported, and trusted to make decisions that mattered. What does success look like when it's built on your own terms? When you refuse to compromise your values for other people's approval? Share in the comments about a dream you refuse to give up on, because what happens next will prove that the best victories are the ones you win while staying true to yourself. She once believed love was a luxury she couldn't afford, until the day the richest man she knew offered her the only thing that mattered: choice. The call came at 6 a.m. on a Saturday, jolting Aaliyah from sleep in Nolan's arms. Dr. Chin's partnership proposal had been approved by her board, the contracts were drawn, and they wanted to announce the national expansion by Monday. That's incredible, Maya said over the phone, her excitement crackling through the speaker. This is what we've been working toward. But as Aaliyah hung up and settled back against Nolan's chest, she felt something unexpected: uncertainty. Not about the partnership. Dr. Chun had proven her commitment to maintaining the fund's integrity, but about what success on this scale would mean for her life, her relationship, her ability to stay connected to the communities that had shaped her. Good news, Nolan asked, his voice rough with sleep. The best. We're going national. Then why do you sound like someone just told you bad news? She turned in his arms, studying his face in the early morning light. Because everything's about to change. Again, change isn't always bad. No, but it's always uncertain. She traced patterns on his chest, needing the connection. What if we get too big? What if we lose sight of why we started this? Then we course correct. That's what good leaders do. And what if the pressure of running a national organization changes me? What if I become someone you don't recognize? His hands framed her face, thumbs brushing across her cheekbones. Aaliyah Foster, I fell in love with your heart, not your job title. Success doesn't change who you are at your core. How do you know? Because I've watched you handle everything from death threats to hostile interviews to major business decisions. You've never compromised your values, not once. Why would you start now? She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that she could scale their mission without losing her soul. But sitting in his bed, watching Atlanta wake up beyond the windows, she felt the weight of responsibility settling heavier on her shoulders. There's something else, she said quietly. Dr. Chen wants me to relocate to San Francisco for the first year, to oversee the expansion personally. The silence that followed was loaded with implications neither wanted to voice. San Francisco, he repeated finally. It's temporary, just until we get the new offices established, the staff trained, the processes standardized. How temporary? 12 to 18 months. More silence. She could practically hear him thinking, weighing words, deciding what was supportive versus what was honest. That's a long time to be apart, he said carefully. I know, but this is the opportunity we've been building toward. The chance to help thousands more businesses, to change systems on a national level. I'm not arguing. I'm just processing. She studied his face, looking for signs of resentment or wounded pride. Instead, she saw something that looked like sadness mixed with determination. Come with me, she said impulsively. What? Come with me to San Francisco. You can run your company from anywhere. We could build something new together in a new place. Aaliyah, I know it's crazy. I know it's asking a lot, but I can't imagine doing this without you. He was quiet for so long she started to worry she'd pushed too far, asked too much. Then he smiled, the expression transforming his whole face. Yes, 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 I'll come with you. Yes, we'll figure it out together. Yes to whatever crazy adventure you want to drag me into next. The relief that flooded through her was immediate and overwhelming. Really, really, but I have one condition. Name it. He rolled them over, pinning her beneath him with a grin that made her stomach flutter. Marry me first. The words hung in the air between them, impossible and inevitable at the same time. Nolan, I'm serious. I want to start this new chapter as your husband, not just your boyfriend who followed you across the country. We've never even talked about marriage. We've talked about everything else. Forever, building something together, being partners in all the ways that matter. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. The only thing we haven't talked about is making it official. This is crazy. People will say, I'm marrying you for your money, for security, for... People will always say something. The question is what we want, not what they think. She looked up at him, this impossible man who'd seen her potential before she believed in it herself, who'd stepped back to let her lead and stepped forward when she needed support, who was willing to uproot his entire life to follow her dreams. Is this a real proposal? She asked. This is me realizing I don't want to spend another day pretending I can live without you. He rolled away long enough to pull something from the nightstand drawer. This is me admitting I bought this 3 months ago and have been waiting for the perfect moment. The ring box was small, velvet, obviously expensive but not ostentatious. When he opened it, she saw a solitaire diamond that caught the morning light and threw it back in rainbow fragments. Aaliyah Foster, he said, his voice steady and sure. Will you marry me? Not because it makes financial sense or looks good publicly, but because I love you more than I ever thought possible and I want to spend the rest of my life proving it. The proposal was everything she'd never known she wanted, private, honest, based on partnership rather than possession. No grand gestures or public displays, just two people choosing each other in the quiet morning light. Yes, she whispered, surprised by how certain the word felt. Yes, I'll marry you. He slipped the ring on her finger with shaking hands, and it fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for her all along. So we're really doing this? She asked as he gathered her into his arms. Marriage, cross-country move, national expansion, the whole crazy thing. We're doing all of it. He kissed her deeply, tasting like promises and morning coffee and forever. Together. Later, as they lay tangled in sheets and sunlight, Aaliyah stared at the ring on her finger and marveled at how much her life had changed. 2 years ago, she'd been a waitress with impossible dreams. Now, she was an engaged CEO about to take her company national. No regrets? Nolan asked, following her gaze to the diamond. None. You. Only that it took me so long to ask. She turned his arms, pressing a kiss to his collarbone. We had to grow into each other first, into who we needed to be for this to work. And now we have. Now we have. Have you ever had someone love you enough to follow your dreams, even when it meant leaving their comfort zone behind? Ever found a partnership so strong that you knew you could handle anything as long as you faced it together? Share in the comments about finding love that supports your ambition instead of competing with it. Because what comes next will prove that the best love stories end with two people becoming more than they could ever be alone. The body she once offered as sacrifice now created life by choice. The ultimate testament to what happens when love sees dignity instead of desperation. The pregnancy test showed 2 pink lines on a Tuesday morning in their San Francisco apartment, 18 months after they'd moved west to expand the fund. Aaliyah stared at it for a full minute, her coffee growing cold as the reality sank in. She was pregnant. They were going to have a baby. The timing was terrible. The fund's national expansion was in its most critical phase, with new offices opening in Chicago and Austin. She was scheduled to testify before Congress about small business development policies. The last thing she needed was the distraction and physical limitations of pregnancy. But staring at those 2 lines, she felt nothing but pure joy. "Good morning, beautiful," Nolan said, appearing in the bathroom doorway with his own cup of coffee. "You're up early." He stopped, noticing the test in her hands. "Is that?" She held it up, unable to keep the smile off her face. "Surprise." The coffee mug hit the bathroom floor, shattering and sending ceramic fragments across the tile. Nolan didn't seem to notice as he crossed the space between them in 2 strides, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around the small bathroom. "We're having a baby," he said, voice full of wonder. "We're actually having a baby. Are you happy?" she asked, suddenly uncertain. They talked about children in abstract terms, some maybe conversations that felt theoretical. This was very, very real. "Happy? Aaliyah, I'm over the moon. I'm terrified and thrilled and completely overwhelmed and so damn happy I can barely think straight." His enthusiasm was infectious. "It's going to change everything. Everything important stays the same. We love each other. We're partners. We're building something meaningful together." He set her down gently, hands immediately moving to her still flat stomach. "Now we just get to share it with someone who's part of both of us." The next few months blurred together in a whirlwind of morning sickness, board meetings, doctor appointments, and expansion plans. The fund's growth exceeded every projection. By the end of the year, they'd invested in over 500 businesses across 12 states, creating more than 15,000 jobs. But it was the personal moments that mattered most. Nolan talking to her growing belly during their nightly walks along the bay. The way he rearranged his entire schedule around her prenatal appointments. His excitement over nursery furniture and baby name lists, and all the tiny details of creating space for their child. "What do you think she'll be like?" he asked one evening, his hand pressed against her 6-month bump as the baby kicked. Call it father's intuition. "Well, if she's anything like her parents, she'll be stubborn, ambitious, and completely convinced she can change the world." "Sounds perfect." The baby arrived 3 weeks early on a foggy San Francisco morning, after 12 hours of labor that left Aaliyah exhausted but exhilarated. Nolan cried when the doctor placed their daughter in his arms. Ugly, happy tears that he didn't bother to wipe away. "She's perfect," he whispered, studying the tiny face with complete fascination. "Look at her, Aaliyah. We made this beautiful person." They named her Naya Foster Winters, a name that honored both their histories while creating something entirely new. Like everything else they'd built together. "She's going to grow up in a world where anything is possible," Aaliyah said, cradling her daughter for the first time. "Where her dreams aren't limited by other people's expectations. Because of what you built. What we built. What she'll build will be even better." The first year of Naya's life transformed them in ways Aaliyah hadn't anticipated. Sleepless nights spent walking a colicky baby made board meetings feel like vacation. Business crises that once consumed her thoughts paled in comparison to the drama of teething and first words and the overwhelming love that came with watching their daughter discover the world. But instead of slowing down their mission, parenthood sharpened their focus. Every policy they influenced, every business they funded, every barrier they broke down wasn't just about abstract ideals anymore. It was about the world they were creating for their daughter. "I want to move back to Atlanta," Aaliyah said one evening as they watched Naya sleep in her crib. "For good." The fund is stable here. Maya can run the West Coast operations. But I want Naya to grow up where our story started. I want her to see the diner where we met, the building where we opened her college fund, the community that taught me that dreams are worth fighting for. Nolan was quiet for a moment, considering. What about the expansion? The national strategy? We can run a national organization from anywhere. But family, real community, that's local. That's personal. Then we go home. They moved back to Atlanta when Naya was 18 months old, settling a house in the neighborhood where Aaliyah had grown up. Not because they couldn't afford better, but because they wanted their daughter to understand where she came from. Nana's Table was still thriving, now run by Marcus with a staff of 12 and a waiting list for weekend brunch. The fund's national headquarters occupied a gleaming office tower downtown, but Aaliyah kept a small office above the restaurant, a reminder of how everything began. Full circle, Nolan said, finding her there on a quiet Sunday afternoon, Naya napping in a portable crib beside the desk. More like a spiral. We're back where we started, but everything's different. Better. So much better. He pulled her into his arms, and she marveled at how perfectly she still fit against his chest after all these years, all these changes, all the growth they'd done separately and together. Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't screwed up that blind date? He asked. Never. Because it wasn't chance, Nolan. It was choice. You chose to see me. I chose to trust you. We chose to build something together instead of accepting what other people said was possible. And now we keep choosing each other. Every day, in every decision, in every dream we chase, and every challenge we face. Naya stirred in her crib, making the soft sounds that meant she was waking up. In a moment, she demanded attention with the imperious authority of a toddler who knew she was loved unconditionally. Soon, she'd be walking, then running, then demanding her own dreams and creating her own impossibilities. She's going to change the world, Aaliyah said, watching their daughter's eyes flutter open. Just like her mother, just like both her parents. As Sunday afternoon light streamed through the windows of the restaurant where their love story began, Aaliyah Foster Winters held her husband and watched their daughter discover consciousness, and felt complete in a way she'd never imagined possible. She'd started as a waitress with dreams too big for her circumstances. She'd become a CEO, a wife, a mother, a woman who'd refused to accept limitations and had built a life without them instead. But more than any title or achievement, she was happy. Genuinely, completely, unreservedly happy with the choices she'd made and the person she'd chosen to make them with. The fund now operated in all 50 states. Nana's Table had inspired 12 similar restaurants in cities across the South. Their marriage had survived success, failure, public scrutiny, and the beautiful chaos of new parenthood. Most importantly, they'd proven that love could bridge any gap between worlds, between backgrounds, between who you were and who you were brave enough to become. What's next? Nolan asked, echoing the question that had started so many of their adventures. Everything, she said, kissing him as their daughter began to babble her own bright commentary on the world she was inheriting. Absolutely everything. So what would you do if someone saw your worth before you believed it yourself? Would you run from possibility or embrace it? Would you let fear keep you small, or would you build something that lasts? If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that remind you what's possible when you refuse to accept limitations. Tell me in the comments what dream you're still afraid to chase, what love you're still afraid to trust, what version of yourself you're still afraid to become. And remember, the most powerful love doesn't rescue you from your life. It recognizes the strength that was there all along and gives you the courage to use it. Because sometimes the girl from the South Side gets the happy ending. Sometimes the impossible love story turns out to be the most real thing of all. Sometimes choosing to believe in yourself changes everything.